Culture warfare and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is Christopher Hopkins, our producer. Welcome, Christopher. We're back. So we have a lot to talk about with culture warfare here on Mark and the Millennials. But first up, you know that Dr. Seuss was canceled. So I have someone very close to me who wrote a nice little Dr. Seuss-like verse. And here's how it reads. I do not like cancel culture. I do not like language vultures. My books bring lessons of love and glee. No publisher can stop us from being free. That's our ode to Dr. Seuss, the latest in the cancel culture wars. And of course, we are calling this podcast Culture Warfare for that very reason. But first up, we have Alex Lazary, is a gentleman in his 30s, and he's running for the Wisconsin United States Senate seat. Now, this is kind of early to say that he's going to run for the United States Senate seat, but he's going to do it anyway. Why? Because, of course, Alex Lazary is a wealthy Democrat, and he's decided that because Daddy has made billions of dollars as a hedge fund manager, that, he's so bored, he hasn't really accomplished a whole lot other than what his father has accomplished for him, at least in this particular case, that Alex Lazary wants to run for United States Senate in Wisconsin. So, Wall Street Journal article reads as follows. Alex Lazary might be swimming upstream as he seeks the United States Senate nomination in Wisconsin from a Democrat Party skeptical of Wall Street and worried about income inequality. The 33-year-old is a former Goldman Sachs analyst and son of Mark Lasry, a billionaire hedge fund manager and now co-owner of the Milwaukee Bucks basketball team. So this young man, 33 years old, wants to run for United States Senate because he's bored. So his daddy bought the Milwaukee Bucks. And apparently this is something his father always wanted to do. Obviously, these two are not from Wisconsin, but they relocate there to buy the team. And now they're like all about Wisconsin. It's so phony. I'm sorry. And this tells you a lot about the billionaire class. But by the way, guys, this is the billionaire class that's running on the Democrat side. I thought Democrats didn't like Wall Street and hedge fund managers. I thought that was something that Democrats didn't believe in, yet it always seems to be, at least in modern America in the 21st century, that the Democrat Party puts these kinds of Senate candidates up. They're really super wealthy. In spite of what they say out of this side of their mouth, on the other side, the rich are the ones who are always running, the uber rich in the Democrat Party. So we have a couple of clips from Alex Lazary himself, whereby he is interviewed and they talk to him about his potential run. And he talks about really, how Milwaukee is not, at least not that bad of a town. So he could see himself representing the state of Wisconsin. I mean, what a complete idiot, essentially talking down to the Midwesterners in the Midwest because he's from, the East Coast. We have a couple of clips on this, and here's the first one.
I was excited by the fact that, hey, we were, possibly going to buy a basketball team. And, to me, that was, and I know for my dad, that was always, a dream of his. I didn't know much about Milwaukee. I knew the Brewers. I knew the Packers were in Wisconsin. I had been to Wisconsin one other time. I went to Oshkosh to help volunteer for Hillary in the primary in 2008 with my sister. And that was it. My first time to Milwaukee was when we came to meet with Senator Cole about possibly purchasing the team. And, I came in with kind of trying to, with just keeping an open mind about the city.
And that's the first time Alex Lasry really talked about the idea of running for United States Senate. Because, he went to Oshkosh once and was working for Hillary, because Hillary, after all, had all of the hedge fund managers working for her, which tells you a lot, once again, about the Democrat Party. And it seems like the hedge fund class and the Wall Street class, they're all Democrats. And I have some theories about that. But first, we have the second clip in this same interview from Alex Lazary, the gentleman who wants to run for Wisconsin United States Senate. And this you have to really listen to because it's really funny. Here's the clip.
The only places I'd lived in prior were New York, Philly, and DC. So, kind of bigger East Coast cities. Mm-hmm. And, when I came here, I think what most surprised me about Milwaukee is the fact that Milwaukee has all of the same things that any other city, especially any other big city, has.
Isn't that amazing? Milwaukee has stuff that, New York has and Philly has and Washington, D.C. has. So, he relocates from these really great cities to Milwaukee, and it's just shocked that it actually is a place where it's livable. It's incredible. And so since he knows absolutely nothing about Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he knows absolutely nothing about the United States Senate, and he knows nothing about the people in the Midwest, because he's got $1 billion, dad's a billionaire, he's going to run for United States Senate because that's what you do when you are part of the hedge fund class, and you definitely run as a Democrat. And my theory about this whole thing of why are hedge fund managers Democrats and why are these rich billionaires who enrich themselves on Wall Street and then become Democrats or are Democrats, it's because they want to get cover. They need cover. Why do they need cover? They need cover because obviously it's the Democrat Party who's saying to these individuals, you are too rich, you're engaging in income inequality, and therefore you need to pay your fair share. So these gentlemen, of course, they hide behind the Democrat label and run for these offices so that they can, get their policy preferences in place and enrich themselves even more. And the Democrat Party is really the party of crony capitalism, because why else would you say on the one hand that the rich Wall Street billionaires are the problem, like Bernie Sanders, and then on the other hand, those are your donors. Those are the people that are increasingly running for office. Those are the individuals who are supporting all of these campaigns because they need cover. And they get in bed with the Democrat Party when they get in office, or they get their own people into office. They completely influence policy. And after they influence policy, they then engage in full-blown crony capitalism. And that's where you don't have a true capitalist system. You have people that are so influencing government and enriching themselves that you have a distorted version of capitalism. And that's exactly what the billionaire class is doing. I just find it fascinating that the Democrat Party doesn't think that people see this, but we should watch this Wisconsin race closely because it will expose, it will illuminate what's really happening in the Democrat Party and how they are being taken over by the rich billionaire class who's doing nothing more than using the Democrat Party as a vehicle to keep their wealth. And that is Alex Lazary to run for Wisconsin Senate. So next up, podcast listeners, talk about culture warfare. Rand Paul questions Biden transgender nominee, Dr. Levine. So Rand Paul, in the Senate confirmation hearing, was questioning Dr. Levine. So President-elect Joe Biden is nominating Pennsylvania health, and this is NPR, by the way, Pennsylvania health expert Dr. Rachel Levine. By the way, Pennsylvania health expert, according to NPR, to be Assistant Secretary for Health in the Department of Health and Human Services, in a move that could make Levine the first openly transgender federal official to win Senate confirmation. Levine is currently the Secretary of Health in Pennsylvania, where she leads the state's fight against COVID-19. She is also professor at Penn State College of Medicine. Levine began her medical career as a pediatrician at Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York. Talk about confusing, right? You got your 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid. You take your kid to Dr. Levine, which is your pediatrician, and your kid's like, Mom, I think it's a dude. I'm sorry. It's funny, okay? It's funny because it is fundamentally unhealthy for children, in my opinion, to be exposed to this. And Rand Paul, on a serious note, gets to that very issue because he questions Dr. Levine about really the central issue of the far left's policy of pushing transgender medicine into middle school. And in some cases, ladies and gentlemen, yes, elementary school. So we have a series of clips on this. We're going to build up, and then we're going to let you hear what a CBS Philly news station says about it. You listen first, and then see what CBS says about it second. So here's Rand Paul questioning Dr. Levine in the United States Senate confirmation hearings, and he asks, what about minors taking hormone blockers? We have that clip, and here it is.
The social pressure to conform, to do what others do and have been doing, as well as the need to be accepted socially and the fear of being rejected by the community. American culture is now normalizing the idea that minors can be given hormones to prevent their biological development of their secondary sexual characteristics. Dr. Levine, you have supported both allowing minors to be given hormone blockers to prevent them from going through puberty, as well as surgical destruction of a minor's genitalia. Like surgical mutilation, hormonal interruption of puberty can permanently alter and prevent secondary sexual characteristics. The American College of Pediatricians reports that 80 to 95% of prepubertal children with gender dysphoria will experience resolution by late adolescence if not exposed to medical intervention and social affirmation. Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex?
Pretty straightforward question. Okay, here's a Biden nominee, Assistant Health Secretary nominee, and the question from Rand Paul is, do you think it's okay to give hormone blockers to minor children, and in many cases, children who are in middle school, obviously minors as well? Very straightforward question, a question that should be answered in a way that is fundamentally understandable and transparent. Listen to Dr. Levine's response to that question. Here it is.
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field with robust research and standards of care that have been developed. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Health, I would look forward to working with you and your office and coming to your office and discussing the particulars of the standards of care for transgender medicine.
The specific
Isn't that incredible? That's unbelievable. I mean, that is a rehearsed response, obviously, very well rehearsed, because it is a rehearsed non-answer. And when you can't answer such a fundamental question as the question asked by Rand Paul, then you have no business being in office, in my opinion, as a cabinet secretary. So Rand Paul goes on and he talks about Africa. In Africa, how you have genital mutilation in many parts of Africa. And it's a cultural norm in some cases, ought not be, but is. And even the United Nations has said that it should be outlawed and should be stopped, should be terminated. And yet here we are in the United States, and we're trying to take on what they're doing in Africa. Because in Africa, the genital mutilation that occurs is actually occurring during teenage years. And rather than going into the whys and the craziness that is occurring there, at least on that continent, still, the United Nations at least has taken a stand saying this is wrong. And then you have the United States of America putting someone up like Dr. Levine, who wants to give a non-answer about whether it's okay to do just that to middle school aged children and high school aged children. So Rand Paul follows up and gives an example of a teenager that has written him who went through this very same process, I believe in middle school, and then now completely regrets her choice. Here's Rand Paul.
I made a brash decision as a teenager, as a lot of teenagers do, trying to find confidence and happiness, except now the rest of my life will be negatively affected, she said, adding that the medicalized gender transitioning was a very temporary, superficial fix for a very complex identity issue. What I'm alarmed at is that you're not willing to say absolutely minors shouldn't be making decisions to amputate their breast or to amputate their genitalia. For most of our history, we believe that minors don't have full rights and that parents need to be involved. So I'm alarmed that you won't say with certainty that minors should not have the ability to make the decision to take hormones that will affect them for the rest of their life. Will you make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be involved in these decisions?
There you go. Will you make a more firm decision as to whether minors should make the decisions on their own, or should parents be included? And should there be a lot more research in this particular area? Here is Dr. Levine's response.
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field. And if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
There you go. It was the exact same answer as before, which meant it is rehearsed, right? When you give the same answer twice to very difficult questions, and of course, not only does it sound rehearsed, it's word by word the same answer. It's a rehearsed answer, which means that these are bad people, right? When you can't provide answers to the most fundamental questions of the day, particularly as it relates to the health of teenagers, which, by the way, I have to tell you, is a parent issue, right? It's up to the parents. The parents are the ones who are in charge of the teenagers and of the children, not the state. But increasingly, this is what's happening on the left. The left is engaging into such a way as they want to take over as parent and push the parent away and say, hey, you don't have any choice in this matter because it's science that the child should be taking hormone blockers because, every 12-year-old should be doing that after all because they know better than you as a parent. It's just unbelievable. So finally we have well, you'll love this. We have Rand Paul. He's crushing Dr. Levine in this last bit. But after that, we have CBS Philly completely misrepresenting what you just heard, which is perfect, right? Because that's part of the reason we're doing this podcast, right? To really expose the hypocrisy, not just on the Democrat left, but also of the media that is wholly owned by the Democrat Party. So here is Rand Paul crushing Dr. Levine. Here it is.
Let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question. The question is a very specific one. Should minors be making these momentous decisions? For most of the history of medicine, we wouldn't let you have a cut sewn up in the ER. But you're willing to let a minor take things that prevent their puberty, and you think they get that back? You give a woman testosterone enough that she grows a beard, you think she's going to go back looking like a woman when you stop the testosterone? You have permanently changed them. Infertility is another problem. None of these drugs have been approved for this. They're all being used off-label. I find it ironic that the left that went nuts over hydroxychloroquine being used possibly for COVID are not alarmed that these hormones are being used off-label.
So isn't that great? The left went crazy all last year, all 2020, over Donald Trump talking about hydroxychloroquine. Okay? I mean, they went crazy about that. The fact that hydroxychloroquine could be used as one way to combat COVID. And of course, the left went nuts about it. And yet the left is using, because of course, by the way, what they said last year is, yeah, but hydroxychloroquine hasn't been approved for use to fight COVID. And now, of course, we have Rand Paul, who's totally illuminating the fact that Dr. Levine thinks it's okay to use unapproved drugs for the purpose of transgender medicine. In other words, drugs that are indeed approved by the FDA, right, for one thing, but that are being used for something for which they are not approved. Really shows and illustrates the hypocrisy. So if you think that's bad enough about hypocrisy, listen to this. Here's CBS News Philadelphia. And the reason we're going to the Philadelphia station is because Dr. Levine is currently the health officer, the top health officer in the state of Pennsylvania, if you can imagine that. So therefore, the city of Philadelphia, CBS News in Philadelphia, covered the hearing and listened to CBS News Philadelphia's take on what you just heard. We have two clips on this. You tell me what you think. Here it is.
Fireworks on Capitol Hill today during the confirmation hearing of Dr. Rachel Levine, the former Pennsylvania Secretary of Health. She is openly transgender and has been appointed by President Biden to be the Assistant Secretary of Health. Now, some of the fiery questioning today centered on transgender issues. Health reporter Stephanie Stahl is here with more on today's hearing. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Jessica. Republican Senator Rand Paul criticized Dr. Levine for her support of gender-affirming surgery and hormone therapy for minors. Now he's being accused of making harmful misrepresentations and for looking for a fight with Dr. Levine.
let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question.
Senator Rand Paul verbally attacked Dr. Rachel Levine during her Senate confirmation hearing. Dr. Levine, the former health secretary in Pennsylvania, if confirmed, would be the highest-ranking openly trans official in the federal government.
Okay, so that's CBS News Philadelphia. Ladies and gentlemen, in the podcast, all my listeners, did Rand Paul attack Dr. Levine? Of course not. But the reason why CBS News is saying that is because the whole idea is for CBS News to say, he's attacking a woman. I'm sorry. Rand Paul's not attacking a woman, okay? In fact, Rand Paul wasn't attacking at all. Rand Paul was asking very measured questions about a fundamental issue in the United States right now that the left is pushing and literally trying to ruin the youth of our country. I do believe that. I'm not saying that there aren't issues where certain children might need assistance, all kinds of assistance, right? But I'm not going to go there. I think that the left is trying to push this into middle schools, obviously high schools, and elementary schools because they're trying to encourage this kind of thing. They're encouraging it without question. But CBS News thinks that Rand Paul attacked Dr. Levine just because Rand Paul was trying to get an answer. Rand Paul is mean. Can you believe that? And you heard that entire questioning that we just played for you. So here's CBS News again, CBS News Philly, and they're saying Rand Paul was widely criticized. Listen to where they say he was widely criticized. We have that clip, and here it is.
Dr. Levine gave the same answers to a barrage of accusations and questions from Senator Paul, who was widely criticized on Twitter.
I think he's a terribly misinformed and ill-educated on the subject of transgender medicine and surgery.
Dr. Sherman Leese is a world-renowned transgender surgeon who operates in the Philadelphia region. He calls Senator Paul's comments discriminatory.
Those remarks had nothing to do with Rachel Levine, who's a highly qualified physician. She's trained in pediatrics and psychiatry.
Oh, yes, exactly. She's trained in pediatrics and psychiatry, which tells you all that you need to know about what Rachel Levine's primary issues are going to be as the Assistant Health Secretary of the United States, right? Pediatrics and psychiatry. So she's going to focus on, Dr. Levine's going to focus on the idea that children should have hormone blockers and surgery. Children, ladies and gentlemen, children. And that parents shouldn't be involved because Dr. Levine couldn't answer the question. So CBS News also said that Twitter really attacked Rand Paul. I mean, the people on Twitter were highly critical of Rand Paul. Do you know who's left on Twitter after all the conservatives have been canceled? The only people left on Twitter are the people that are the progressives and the far left and the advocates for transgenderism in children I'm talking about, okay? As an adult, fine. Children, I just don't get it, don't agree with it. I've never agreed with it. But nonetheless, I can only hope that the United States Senate and in particular Joe Manchin, who can be the playmaker on this particular issue as to whether Dr. Levine gets actually either, I don't know, canceled or whether Dr. Levine actually becomes the next Assistant Health Secretary. Whether that happens, it's all up to Joe Manchin, in my opinion. We shall see. And that is Rand Paul questions Biden transgender nominee. So next up, podcast listeners, why did Amazon cancel Justice Thomas? Can you believe that? So Amazon has actually canceled Justice Thomas. And in the Wall Street Journal opinion section, Jason Riley does a great job and he writes a terrific opinion piece. I just want to read a small part of this so that you can understand the setup. So now that another February has come and gone, perhaps Amazon will revert to offering customers a broader and more variegated view of Black history. Early last month, Amazon deleted a documentary film about Justice Clarence Thomas from its popular streaming service. Titled Created Equal, Clarence Thomas, in his own words, and called from the more than 30 hours of interviews with its subject, the film recounts Justice Thomas's rise from poverty in segregated Georgia to Yale Law School and eventually to the Supreme Court. Along the way, viewers learn that the justices' views on race, religion, politics, and the role of the judiciary. The documentary began airing on PBS in May 2020 and streaming on Amazon in October, but it was taken down by Amazon on February the 8th during Black History Month, according to the director, Michael Pack, and he has never been told why. Our distributor, who's the one who made the deal with Amazon, has repeatedly asked Amazon for an explanation, but they haven't given any, Mr. Pack told me by phone that last week. They have the right to pull anything from their site, and they don't have to give it an explanation. So it's not a contract violation, technically, but many people have complained, and they haven't put it back up. And so Amazon clearly has an axe to grind against people who are conservative. We all know that. That's not a surprise because we know what they've done to Parler, right? We've seen that. But during Black History Month, it's shocking that Amazon has decided to try to cancel Justice Thomas on the Supreme Court, the only Black justice on the Supreme Court. Why isn't the left calling racism, right? Because that's exactly what they would do if anyone else other than Amazon did that. Why aren't they even talking about free speech, the left? Because they don't care about free speech anymore, ladies and gentlemen. We know this. We know this, and this is proof, right? It's not about how you look anymore in the left. It's about how you think. You've got to think the right way. And Chief Justice Thomas doesn't think the right way. So Bill Maher, the comedian, speaks about cancel culture and the craziness of the cancel culture that's just going on across the United States. This is a recent monologue that he just had. We're going to play a series of clips on this just because it goes to this segment. Why did Amazon cancel Justice Thomas? And we have the first clip up from Bill Maher, and here it is.
And finally, new rule, liberals need a stand your ground law for cancel culture, so that when the woke mob comes after you for some ridiculous offense, you'll stand your ground. Stop apologizing, because I can't keep up anymore with who's on the shit list. Now, lately, Republicans have been trying to appropriate the term cancel culture to describe what happens to them when they get a just comeuppance for actual crimes. And this muddying the water is unfortunate because cancel culture is real, it's insane, and it's growing exponentially, and it's coming to a neighborhood near you.
Of course it's coming to a neighborhood near you. And of course that's Bill Maher. We have a couple of other clips from him as well. But he sets up his monologue and it's like, cancel culture is out of control. It's coming to a neighborhood near you. It already has, right? Amazon has already canceled the only Black justice on the United States Supreme Court. And we're going to give many other examples. And you know what many of them are, right? Dr. Seuss, right? They want to cancel Dr. Seuss. And of course, the left is saying, well, we don't actually want to cancel Dr. Seuss. We want to cancel some of Dr. Seuss's books. But there are others on the left that are like, well, we should just cancel Dr. Seuss altogether. Because if he wrote a couple of bad books, according to the left that is, then, we may want to just get rid of all of the books because that means all of Dr. Seuss's life is bad. It's not good. We have to just cancel him. So here's Bill Maher giving an example, a specific example of the cancel culture. And we have that clip.
Take Mr. Emmanuel Cafferty. He was a San Diego gas and electric worker, but he got fired because someone reported him making a white supremacist hand gesture outside the window of his truck. But he's not a white supremacist, he's Latino. And he wasn't making a hand gesture, he was probably just flicking a booger.
And of course, if you didn't have a chance to see this, if you're watching this, you have a chance to see this gentleman. He's Latino, he's in his truck, and he's making a hand gesture, and it could very well have been a cigarette in his hand. He was flicking a cigarette. Of course, Bill Maher says maybe he was flicking a booger. Obviously, it's all about humor with Bill Maher, which is good because we do need to learn to laugh at ourselves, including elected officials especially, and certainly the left, which is incapable of laughing at itself, which I think really is Bill Maher's central theme. But this gentleman is actually nothing. He's a guy in a truck, and he's his hand is a certain way and he's Latino. He's clearly not doing anything wrong. So you can't see that, of course, from listening to the podcast, but it's just classic, right? I see something that you did and I'm going to interpret what you did, and I'm going to interpret in such a way that it's going to define your entire life and your entire being. And that means that you as an individual must be destroyed because I am much more virtuous than you. That is modern America. So Bill Maher says, well, many Americans are even afraid to share their opinions. Folks, if there were ever a central theme of this segment, why did Amazon cancel Justice Thomas? Why? If there were ever a central theme, this would be it, as Bill Maher talks about so many Americans who are so afraid to just speak openly. Here's the clip.
And 62% of Americans say they have opinions they're afraid to share. 80% of Americans, young, old, rich, poor, conservative, liberal, white, minority, all hate the current atmosphere of hypersensitivity. Yeah, everybody hates it, and no one stands up to it. Because it's always the safe thing to swallow what you really think and just join the mob.
Well, that's because you're afraid of getting fired from your job, right? I mean, if you were to post something on Facebook, or if you were to write an opinion piece and submit it to a newspaper, such as an online newspaper or even a print newspaper, doesn't matter, and your employer saw that and it wasn't the correct way of thinking, at least according to your employer, and it had nothing to do with your employee, that employer is going to fire you. And that's why people are terrified. 62% of Americans are afraid. This is Cato Institute information that Bill Maher is using. 62% are afraid of even talking openly about what they think about anything, by the way, not just what they think about politics, anything, because of the nutty behavior of the left. And they have lost their minds. Proof be told, Lori Lightfoot is the mayor of Chicago. And here is an article from 5 Chicago, Channel 5. After continued debate over whether to remove monuments and art throughout Chicago, imagine that, art and monuments, particularly those depicting former presidents Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, Mayor Lori Lightfoot said Wednesday that one thing will not change. During a press conference, Lightfoot was asked about her thoughts on the notion that Chicago statues of Lincoln and Washington might be problematic. And I'm going to quote her. She says, well, I'm not going to get ahead of myself, Lightfoot said. I think what the Monuments and Murals Committee did was identify those statues and murals and other historical markers that are worthy of conversation. And I think they are worthy of conversation. Let's be clear. We're in the land of Lincoln, and that's not going to change. So kind of a double speak there from Lori Lightfoot. It's like, well, this is the land of Lincoln. Of course, that is the motto of the state of Illinois, the land of Lincoln. But now you have, of course, Lori Lightfoot saying, we need to have a conversation, but this is the land of Lincoln, but maybe we should do something. Imagine, ladies and gentlemen, taking down art, right? It's the left that always pushed the limits on art throughout really much of the 20th century. They were pushing the limits on art. And typically in the 20th century, it was the right who said, that's going too far. I don't want that art to be put up in public. I don't want that art to be hung in someone's home, even though it's their private home. And now the left is triggered by art in the 21st century. They're triggered. They're triggered by statues, which themselves are works of art, but also art that may be outside, painted on the side of a building. Triggered. So they get to decide what you get to see, because they know best. And if that isn't enough, we have the latest and greatest, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a congresswoman from Florida. She's basically saying there should be no tribute to Rush Limbaugh. He should be canceled. He passed away, as you know, but Debbie Wasserman Schultz is such an angry person, and I'm going to use Rush Limbaugh's term for her. He used to call her Debbie, what was it? Wasserman, Angry Schultz. I've forgotten. You might be able to help me on this. It was a certain term what's her mouth or something like that, Schultz. In any event, she is a current congresswoman, and she opposes any flags being flown half-staff in the state of Florida, and she opposes any kind of like really memorial service for this gentleman, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, talk show host in American history. I think probably really the greatest talk show host in American history. So obviously, I think it's pretty extraordinary, and so should all of us, about what he's accomplished, no matter whether or not you agree with him or not. And so Rush Limbaugh calls her because the producer just corrected me and gave me the information, and I really appreciate that. That is Christopher Hopkins, of course. He's our millennial. And he said it's actually Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz. That's what Rush Limbaugh always called her. And I think probably this is her way of getting back, right? I'm going to cancel you. It's like, Debbie, the man's dead. You know, have some grace in death. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do as human beings. But nonetheless, I think it's a great thing to call her moving forward, to kind of carry that Rush tradition. Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz. And of course, then we have Dr. Seuss. And the actual Dr. Seuss, who they're trying to cancel completely, or at least some of his books, because they got triggered. So I'm going to read something from Dr. Seuss. This, by the way, is actually from Dr. Seuss. And it reads as follows. The more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. That's so threatening, isn't it? Isn't that threatening? Oh my gosh. What can happen? And that is, why did Amazon cancel Justice Thomas? So next up, podcast listeners, Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, shreds the teachers union at CPAC. So Trump made his first appearance in public at CPAC, and CPAC was held in Florida because typically it's held at National Harbor in the state of Maryland, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. But because Maryland is closed, including Maryland's schools, they're not completely open, not even close to it. Maryland's private schools, by the way, are open, but their public schools are closed. And because so many other things are closed and there are COVID restrictions in Maryland, CPAC relocated to Florida. So Maryland lost all of that income from the thousands and thousands of people that would normally be coming there. You can imagine, right? Well, nonetheless, that's where CPAC is held. Donald Trump makes his first show at CPAC. And we have a couple of clips on this, and they're quite good because Trump really frames the current problem in the United States with the teachers' unions. And he is so right on, and it demonstrates a very clear difference between former President Donald Trump and how he would govern and the way the country is currently being governed by Joe Biden, where they are completely in bed with the teachers' unions. And we have the first clip at CPAC with Donald Trump, and here it is.
Their callous indifference to working families is equally clear when it comes to the critical matter of getting America's children back to school. And they must get back and get back right now. Right now. Crazy. Terrible. Terrible. The Biden administration is actually bragging about the classroom education they are providing to migrant children on the border, while at the same time millions of American children are having their futures destroyed by Joe Biden's anti-science school closures. Think of it.
Did you catch that, by the way? Did you catch that last part? So we have all of these migrants and illegals coming across the border in the United States because Joe Biden and the Democrat Party, they don't believe in borders, okay? We know that. They don't believe in American exceptionalism. And they also don't believe in protecting the American people from many of these individuals who are crossing the border who may not mean us well or certainly want to drain resources, and they have no intention, not all people, by the way, but some of them, right? Just want to be clear about that. But we know the Democrat Party, they don't believe in borders. So Joe Biden has found, his administration has found, that there are so many unaccompanied minors, that means minors that are showing up at the border, children, without their parents. Why? I have no idea. I really don't. I don't have a clue as to why there are so many children showing up without their parents. But I suppose that's a strategy, right, of getting your children into the United States and using chain migration to pull yourself in later. And it's wrong, of course. and it's without question, the cartels are involved in this. But the Biden administration has decided that the children who are the minors and they're unaccompanied should receive in-class education. They should be educated while they're waiting to be processed and released into the United States. They're being educated, and so many students across the country aren't. Joe Biden is in bed with the teachers union to keep American students out of the classroom. He won't let them go back. They're suffering, the American students are, and he's putting illegal aliens first. That's the Democrat Party. Put illegal aliens first. Put them ahead of the American people. That's exactly what they believe. It's exactly what they do. And I got to tell you something, if you aren't outraged about this, no matter what you think about Donald Trump, whether you like him, hate him, don't want him to run again, do want him to run again, didn't like his mannerisms and his, and the way he spoke to people, he nonetheless is the only person that's actually talking about this, really, and has the megaphone to talk about it. And yet, the American people aren't being told this on the national news. Of course not. Because you're not going to really see this information reported at all, except for maybe just two or three actual news channels. So we have the second part of Donald Trump's speech to the teachers, to CPAC, about the teachers union. And he really calls them out. And there's nothing better than hearing Donald Trump call out the teachers union at a place like CPAC, which was, of course, absolutely and positively oversubscribed. And he's there because this is really the issue of our time. And we know this. We've talked about this many times, and I'm so glad it happened in Florida. Here's that clip.
There's no reason whatsoever why the vast majority of young Americans should not be back in school immediately. The only reason that most parents do not have that choice is because Joe Biden sold out America's children to the teachers' unions. His position is morally inexcusable, you know that. Joe Biden has shamefully betrayed America's youth, and he is cruelly keeping our children locked in their homes. No reason for it whatsoever. They want to get out.
Of course he is. Because if you are a Democrat in modern America, you don't believe in school choice. That is, you don't believe in educational freedom, the idea that you can send your children to any school that you want to, public, private, or charter, and then use your education dollars that are collected by government and spend them as you want to. And the Democrat Party, of course, doesn't want that to happen because the teachers union doesn't want competition. But there is competition in Florida, and Florida is flourishing. It's absolutely flourishing, which is why so many people from the Mid-Atlantic states and the Northeast are moving to Florida. That's why so many people from the state of Illinois are moving to Florida and elsewhere. We know that for a fact. And of course, Californians are moving to Nevada, and they're moving to Texas, and they're moving to Arizona. It's happening all across the country. And we also see articles like this in the Daily Wire. Matt Walsh says, kids are struggling to focus during online school. Now they're being diagnosed with ADHD. It's just cruel. I just can't imagine in modern America today being a Democrat and saying to yourself, oh yeah, I'm a proud Democrat. I love the idea that we're keeping the schools closed because we need to keep children safe. It's just nonsense at this particular point in time. And if you look at the data, it is not supported by keeping schools closed, especially since the private schools have been open since last September. And they're completely open, utterly. They're doing sports in private schools. So get this. If you want to ever hear an idea of why the teachers unions are so proud, not proud, actually is, if you ever want to hear an idea why the teachers unions are so out of control and so powerful, that's the word, powerful. Get this. A Maryland teacher's aide in Montgomery County, Maryland, was seen masturbating during a Zoom lesson with 8th graders. He was suspended, but not fired. So here's the article. The teacher is claiming that he was accidentally pleasuring himself. He admitted that he was doing it, and he still wasn't fired. And of course, it's on Zoom in front of his 8th graders. And it's an actual degradation of our educational system. So here's what it says. A teacher's aide in Maryland was pleasuring himself, I'm going to use that term instead, during a Zoom call with 8th graders, but insists he thought the online lesson had ended. Mark Shack, an assistant for special education students at Shady Grove Middle School in Gaithersburg, told the Bethesda magazine, which is in Montgomery County, Maryland, he told them that he was unaware his self-love session had been captured on the virtual call until being interviewed. Imagine that. So you didn't know that your self-love session was being taped on Zoom until someone calls you up and says, guess what? We've got a problem. Houston, there's a problem. The 21-year employee from Montgomery County Public Schools, who also runs Pirate Magic, a business that throws pirate parties for youngsters, while he portrays a character named Captain Sillybones. The Montgomery County school teacher said he has since been placed on administrative leave, but he's not been fired. So if you ever want to know how powerful the teachers' unions are, if you ever want to know truly how powerful they are, some states obviously are more powerful than others. But the states where you have no educational freedom and no school choice are the states where teachers' unions are the strongest. And here's an example, and most disgusting example, of the teachers' union protecting a pedophile, okay? A pedophile. And he's still employed with the system. And I'm sure they'll find another job for him somewhere within the system. Maybe he'll even be teaching again in a school near you, as long as there are teachers' unions. And that is Trump shreds the teachers' union. So get this, podcast listeners. Next up, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer?
Of course.
And here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And the dumbest bill in America is banning gas stations in California. That's right. Banning gas stations in Petaluma, California. It's actually spelled Petaluma, but they pronounce it Petaluma. We have a series of clips on this that we want to play for you. And as you can imagine, it's California, so they're all about climate change. But their idea is we're going to get rid of all the gas stations and everything's going to be just fine. Everything's going to be just fine. For the people in California, well, I think that we have found some of the reasons why people in California want to leave, right? Because it is causing gasoline prices to go through the roof, among many other things. But nonetheless, here's KPIX in San Francisco interviewing Petaluma Vice Mayor Brian Barnacle about this issue. We have that clip, and here it is.
My hope is that by doing this, other cities follow suit, and we start to end the expansion of the fossil fuel infrastructure.
Yeah, so that's his plan, right? He's going to dismantle the fossil fuel infrastructure. He thinks he has the right to decide what you get to drive, right? Because, and by the way, when you look at him, you can just tell he's the quintessential hippie. He really has nothing else to do. Really, folks, in Petaluma, California, is that all you have to do? I mean, you don't have like a homeless problem or tons of other problems like the rest of California. This is your priority. So if that isn't enough, in Petaluma, California, there's a Safeway. Safeway is a grocery store chain, and they have a Safeway in Petaluma in the town. And Safeway's been wanting to put a gas station, as you often see at Safeways across the country. They want to put a Safeway gas station in front of the Safeway grocery store. And the reason they do that is because if you shop at Safeway, you get discounts if you buy their gas. Kind of like Sam's Club, right? Well, Safeway has been sued for something like 8 years by the citizens of Petaluma to stop that terrible Safeway gas station because gasoline is bad. So we have this clip also from KPIX in San Francisco. It's quite illuminating, and here it is.
I feel we should have as many as is required for the population, and I think we should not have a moratorium on how many gas stations we have. We voted to have one put in where Safeway is, just around down the road here, and that hasn't happened yet.
That Safeway gas station was proposed 8 years ago, and right now lawsuits are preventing it from moving forward. But if it does get the green light, it could be the city's 17th and final gas station in the city. UC Berkeley experts say the move from Petaluma might not necessarily be the answer in California, where gas prices are already sky high.
So gas prices are sky high in California. Petaluma, California wants to get rid of the gas stations. They want to ban them, right? And so if you live in California, certainly in Petaluma, and you like your combustible engine car, for whatever reason, you think it's the best thing ever. I like my combustible engine car, I admit it. Then where do you get gas? How many miles do you have to drive to buy gas? And of course, if you were to ask Brian Barnacle, the vice mayor of Petaluma, he would say, that's your problem. Buy an electric car. I mean, who do these people think they are? They're so arrogant. So here's an Axios article about this. It says, cities are starting to ban new gas stations. So Petaluma, California has voted to outlaw new gas stations, the first of what climate activists hope will be numerous cities and counties to do so. So now you see who's behind it. Why it matters? Well, expect more such ordinances at the local level, particularly in liberal towns, you think? Grassroots groups are popping up with the mission of spreading this type of ban and forcing pollution cleanups at existing gas stations. The movement aims to accelerate the shift to electric vehicles. This is not a ban on the existing gas stations, which are providing all the gas currently needed. How do you know that? Matt Crow, U.S. Oil and Gas Campaign Director for the environmental group Stand Earth, tells Axis. Well, let's just say this. If you have less gas stations, you probably have less competition. If you have less competition, you have higher prices, right? You have higher demand because there are less stations to buy from, and therefore the people there decide, oh my gosh, it's so expensive to buy gas here, maybe I should just move somewhere else. Well, of course, Brian Barnacle's point is we don't care if you move somewhere else. Take your gas car with you, and you're only cool here. You're only woke if you have, an electric vehicle. So the Axios article continues. This is not a ban on existing gas stations, which are providing all the gas currently needed. The problem with allowing new gas stations is we really don't need them, and they're putting existing gas stations out of business. The problem with allowing new gas stations is we really don't need them, and they're putting existing gas stations out of business. Competition is bad in Petaluma. So, between the lines, read between the lines, is what Axios says. The Petaluma effort had the support of Stand.Earth, which runs a campaign called Safe Cities, an acronym for Stand Against Fossil Fuel Expansion. The group says 30 cities and counties have passed policies in keeping with their agenda, but none has gone as far as Petaluma. So there you go, climate activists. Well done, well done. So you're basically forcing more people to leave California, and you're basically prescribing the kind of technology that they have to use, because what about hydrogen vehicles, right? Why not just let all the technologies compete equally on an even playing field, and then people can decide which car that they want? I'll bet you that many people would eventually decide to choose the cleaner car, the car with the least amount of emissions, if they actually had choices, and if the choices were really theirs to make. But also the prices also have to be cheaper. They have to be cheaper. They have to be competitive with the existing vehicles. But if you're on the left, you don't believe in that stuff, that pesky competition stuff, that, pesky capitalism stuff that just gets in the way of your ideology, of your religion. So if you think that's bad enough in Texas, in the state of Texas, all of their wind turbines froze up because of the ice storm, right? There were also problems, to be fair, with the natural gas plants. They had freeze-ups too. But the difference is that all of the natural gas plants and the oil-fired plants and the coal plants did not freeze up, but all of the wind turbines did. And those wind turbines produced at least 10% of Texas's electricity, maybe more. I've heard anywhere from 10% to 22%. So let's go with the lower number to be safe. As a result of that, the citizens in Texas, what did they have to do? They had to get their generators to work, right? Or they had to go buy a generator. So you have hundreds of thousands of citizens across Texas buying generators, or if they had an existing generator, then they started it up so that they could run their electricity. Well, only one problem. You need gasoline to run generators, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't have gasoline stations, then you can't get gasoline to run your generators. Well, we have that example in Texas, right? Because we just had this catastrophe in Texas. We have a clip on that from Corpus Christi. It's from Chris 6 News in Corpus Christi. Here it is.
The sign on the pump says, "Sorry, out of service." What that means at this Sunoco at Tarleton and Crosstown is that they're out of gas.
Gas stations are used to customers doing this. But with lingering wintry weather-related power outages, they're saying a whole lot of a different type of customer.
I'll just pick up some gasoline for our generator.
Brian Bro's home on North Padre Island has been without electricity for 2 days. His latest trip for gas took him all the way to the Stripes at Crosstown and Morgan.
Every gas station I've been to has been really busy. We're all the way back towards the island, but there's a lot of chaos right now over fuel. I don't know why.
Generators alone are likely not the explanation for the run on gas. Unsubstantiated rumors of an impending gas shortage are a more likely culprit.
Okay, so fair enough, right? Pretty balanced reporting there. But imagine if you didn't have gas stations at all. Imagine if they weren't there. So they already have a shortage in Texas because of the massive power outages, because the wind turbines froze, and a couple of the other fossil fuel plants froze up as well because of the lack of winterization, among, I'm sure, many other problems too. And so people in Texas went directly to the gas stations and they said, I need gas because I want to run my generator so I can keep my house warm because it's freezing outside. Okay? I need all of my stuff in my house to work so I can at least continue life as normal. So in Petaluma, get rid of the gas stations, what would happen? Well, I'll tell you what would happen. In California, you have regular brownouts. You have regular rolling blackouts because of policy decisions that are being made in California, not just at the town level and the county level, but also at the state level. And we've seen it year after year after year. And what do you do in California when you have a power outage? You start up your generator. And what does your generator run on? Usually gasoline, sometimes natural gas too. If you're fortunate enough to have all of that natural gas infrastructure installed first, it's much more expensive, mind you, but the chances are you don't have that and you're running your generator off of gasoline. And these kind of details are things that people like Vice Mayor Brian Barnacle don't even understand. Because when you're Vice Mayor of Petaluma, California, all that matters is ideology. You don't care about the consequences of your ideology. You don't care about what it does to real people's lives. You don't care about what happens when things just start falling apart, because the way you see it, you're in charge, right? It's a religion that you're following. And if you don't like it, move somewhere else. And that is the dumbest bill in America, banning gas stations in California. And that's it from Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. A special thanks to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. This is, of course, Mark Fisher. Thanks. And check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler soon, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.